What's up, guys? In this section, we're going to be talking about the maci data object itself and getting an understanding and information on it. And we're going to go over maci's object methods so you can have a better insight to how to use all the functionality in code during the code's runtime. This is going to help you have a much better grasp and understanding of what the maci data object is all about and some of the tools that you can use to be more effective and efficient. All of it should be pretty straightforward and feel pretty familiar to how you would normally do things in Python, with some of the functionality requiring a little bit further understanding, especially in the mapping video. But don't worry, we'll unpack everything and hopefully make it well and understood. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about the maci data object and get a better understanding of it. So I'm going to go ahead and create an empty maci data object. I'm just going to create a variable called maci data, and then I'm just going to go ahead and write maci.build and execute that function. This function was talked about in the previous section regarding the API functions. Go ahead and check that out if you want a better understanding of it. But it simply just returns an empty maci data object. As you can see, when I hover over that, see it showing here, returning maci data object, or OBJ for short. So what is a maci data object? The maci data object is a custom data type that provides unique functionality to perform useful operations on attribute names in the object and is responsible for holding all your stored data during the runtime of the code. If that doesn't really make sense, in short, the maci data object basically has all of your data in it and provides a set of tools and features to update and manipulate it. And when I say all your data, using an example like the mygame.save file, like we've been using, all this data that you see here and names, which these are variable names in the file, but they get turned to attribute names that are assigned to values, and then they are stored inside a single object called the maci data object. And as we've been seeing throughout the videos, kind of demonstrating how to access them and seeing how to view them, the maci data object holds all responsibility for that data. So hopefully that makes sense so far, but let's go ahead and demonstrate some of this. So first we have an empty maci data object, which we've already created. And now what I'd like to do while in code is go ahead and create some basic data to store into our object. So I'm going to go ahead and create that now. And I'm going to use the example of our file from our mygame.save file and just kind of use that as some fun example to add data to our object. So I'm going to do maci data.username. And then we're going to assign the same value, Johnny88. And I believe this may have been demonstrated before in a previous video, but officially this is how you would create names and values inside of your maci data object. So I'm going to continue creating the names and values up to the list that we have in our game save file. Okay. So I've gone ahead and manually created the attribute names and the values that I want to add to my object to match the example in the mygame.save file. So I'm going to go ahead and close this because we don't need this as a reference anymore. We're doing all of this in code. I'll close it over here as well. And now you might be wondering, how do I view this data or access this data? Well, to access the data, you would simply do it like you normally would in an object by referencing the attribute name. Let's go ahead and bring our print function up here. So I'll go maci data.username. And so if I run this, I should get the string back Johnny88, and I do, after printing that to the terminal. And so you can imagine any other value would be the same as you would normally expect in Python, getting your value back, accessing the attribute name. Now, what are some other ways you can view your data? I believe this has been shown before. But if you just simply print the maci data object itself, it should return a representation of your data. So if you run this, we print the object itself, you see here's the full representation of your data. It shows the maci data object, and then the names and value pairs associated with each other. This is useful to view the representation of the data, especially for debugging, if you want to ensure that your data is showing up accordingly. And if you're already aware, you can call the repr function as well. So let's go ahead and call the repr function, which is just short for representation, and that should return the same exact result. And if you call the string function, it should return the same exact result. Now for the string function, that may change in the future, but for now, this is currently how the maci data object represents its data, whether you print the object directly or call a string function or the repr function. Now, if you have an empty maci data object, it should just show empty. As you can see here, nothing was assigned, so it's just going to show an empty object. But that's one way on how you can view the data. Of course, you can do some of the native Python ways to view the data, which would be calling the dir function, which is for directory. And this will show you a lot of internal, like dunder methods, as well as the other methods, and of course the attribute names on there. We do see username right there, and they're essentially alphabetized, and we do see money right there, starting score, etc. And of course, if we call like the vars function, this would give you a much different view of the maci data object, kind of reviewing some other internal attributes that are showing up in there, but of course the other ones that we created as well. However, maci does have its own built-in way of viewing the represented data, just by simply printing the object itself to get a view of your data. So the next thing I want to talk about is using operators on the object and its built-in behavior. Currently at this time, for maci version 1, there's only a couple operators within the maci data object that actually perform some operation. And currently that's bool and equality. So let's talk about the bool first. The bool one is very simple. If you run the built-in bool function within Python on a maci data object, all it's going to tell you is whether the object is empty or has data in it. So if I run this, currently it's saying true because the maci data object has data in it. And let's go ahead and print the actual data as well, just so we can see both. So we see here's the actual data, and it's saying true because there's actual data in it. And so if we actually comment that out from assigning names and values, now we should have an empty maci data object. And if we run this, now it should say false. And clearly we can see this maci data object is empty. So if you're familiar with working with like an empty list or a list that has data in it, it's kind of the same idea. Where if the maci data object has data in it, it's going to be true. And if the maci data object has no data in it, it's going to be false. So hopefully that makes sense, especially when you do conditional checks against your maci data object. The next operator is checking for equality. So I'm going to go ahead and create a second maci data object. That way we can compare two different maci data objects. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created two separate maci data objects, and they truly are unique. Every time you run the build, it builds a brand new fresh maci data object. And anytime you load a file, I forgot to mention this, it does load a fresh new maci data object as well. And what that really means is just the maci data object has a unique memory address, and these two maci objects are not the same object in memory, so I just want to make that understood. So if we go ahead and run this, currently I have it set up to just print the first object's data and the second object's data. So when we run this, you should see there's maci data object, we'll call it 1, and then there's maci data object 2, and they both have the same names and values in them. So if we were to run an equality check on both of these objects, so let's start with the first one and get the second one, this should return true. So let's run that, and so it does. It returns true. So now if I actually go in here and change just one character, we'll just change it to a 9 on this specific value. On the second object here, it should now return false, and it does. So even if one character in one of your attribute names values changes, the maci data objects are not alike. And again, this just checks for equality. It does not check if they are the same object. If you're not sure what I mean, you can simply understand this by using the is keyword. So if you do the is keyword, this is actually going to show false, right? Because these objects are not the same. But of course, once I change this to 88, you would think that it should return true, but it's actually still going to return false. But of course, if we switch this back to equality, it's going to return true. If you didn't know the difference between equality and the is keyword, I would definitely look into it, but the is keyword is simply checking if they're the same object in memory, but they're not. They are truly completely unique objects. So the last thing I want to show in this video is the get and load adders methods. And these are useful methods if you actually want to optionally view your data in a different way, which is a built-in method to view your data and also represent your data. Or if you actually want to load attribute names and values inside of the maci object directly in code. So I've gone back to our previous example using our simple game save names and values. And what I want to introduce to you now is the getAdders method. So the getAdders method is a simple method. It simply returns a dictionary representation of all of the attribute names and values within your maci data object. So if we were to just go ahead and run this and hit go, you can see that what gets printed to the terminal is a dictionary representation of your attribute names and values. So as you can imagine, you can simply access this by accessing a key name. Let's just try username, for example. So if I access this, because this is returning a dictionary, this should just give me the username back, and it does. This is also a useful way if you wanted to convert your maci data object in code to a dictionary immediately. So that's the getAdders method, which is another useful way to view your attribute names and values. And now I'm going to show you the loadAdders method, which would allow you to do the opposite, loading attribute names and values, and simply, if you already guessed it, using a dictionary. So I've gone ahead and created the same attribute names and values, but using key value pairs in a dictionary in Python. And we're going to load that data inside of our maci data object to give you, or give us, the same attribute names and values we had before. So first, before we do that, let's just go ahead and remove all this. And just for demonstration, I'll show you if we print the maci data object, it's currently empty. And so now let's go ahead and fill it with our dictionary data. So this is done in place. So if we grab our maci data object here and type in loadadders, as you can see, we hover over it, we can see it loads data from a dictionary into the maci data object in place. And all the top level names, as you can imagine, are going to be your attribute names. And whatever values can be whatever. It can even be nested data, doesn't matter. But just remember, the top level names are going to be your attribute names. So if I pass in this dictionary data now and run this, again, this is done in place. We don't need to assign it to anything. And now if we print this, you see all of our data is now available to us again, as it was before, but loaded in through a dictionary now. So if I were to access this attribute name username, like so, I can easily access that like you'd normally expect. This loadAdders method is extremely useful if you want to load data during the runtime of your code or from other data sources into your maci data object, and all you have is a dictionary representation or converted it to a dictionary, and you can easily import it in to your maci data object like so. And if you've already watched the section on dumping data, you can already imagine what you'd be able to do from there. Now, something I want to point out in the loadAdders method, which is noted in there, if your key name in your dictionary is not following the Python convention, it will be skipped. And that's a very important understanding. So let me just demonstrate that real quick. Now, if you add a 1 inside of this key name, this is actually a valid key name inside of a dictionary, right? Python doesn't care about that because it's a string. However, I'm just going to show the full representation. If we run this now, you're actually going to see one username doesn't exist in the representation here. And that's because that doesn't follow the valid Python-styled naming conventions for naming variables and attribute names. As you can see, when I type this out with a leading 1, it actually throws a syntax error because that's invalid naming convention in Python. So simply just remember that if your key name is not properly named following the Python naming convention or standards, then the attribute name will simply just not show up in your data object. All right, so that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this video and some of the ways you can view your represented data and how you can assign it in code. I hope this was helpful to you, and I'll go ahead and see you in the next video. Thank you so much, and take care.